Langro, the language extinction game. Can you kill a language faster than the French Ministry of Education? Ban it, shame it, blame the parents. Now with expansion packs, Occitan obliteration, Cornish collapse, Breton breakdown.
Includes a bonus DLC, forced assimilation, EU edition. Langro, speak up while you still can.
Good evening, legends, linguists, and the monolingual majority silently Googling what I just said. I'm Becca, reporting in from a former colony. White, yes, vision, perfect. I don't speak for the voiceless, I just listen to what was never meant to be silenced. I'm your language enthusiast here on Nubian Narrator News, and while I may look like I came with subtitles and a Pret subscription, don't let the packaging fool you. I'm here for the words they tried to bury. I don't fetishize culture. I follow it. I learn. I amplify. Because languages aren't relics. They're resistance. They're maps of memory. And every time a mother tongue dies, the world forgets a little more about how to feel properly. Tonight, we're giving airtime to a language older than France, prouder than Paris, and far saltier than the croissant-brained bureaucrats who tried to kill it. I'm talking about Breton, the Celtic tongue of the sea, the soil, and the stubborn. So if you came for basic French, you're in the wrong arrondissement. This is Nubian Narrator News. I'm Becca, white, wired for words, and wildly unwilling to let a single language die on my watch. Let's begin. Once upon a time in a land the French called La Bretagne and the locals still call Brège, there lived a language with a sword in its mouth. That language was Breton, the tongue of sailors, rebels, poets, and peasants, of myths and music and mud-stained memory. But Breton isn't just old, it's ancient. It sailed across the Channel with refugees from collapsing Roman Britain in the 5th century. Think about that. When the Anglo-Saxons were still stabbing each other over goats, the Bretons were building monasteries and singing stories older than Christ in stone chapels by the sea. It's not a dialect, it's a defiance. It's not an accent, it's an act of rebellion. Mi zo gannet e Kreitz are more. I was born in the middle of the sea. That's one of the most famous Breton songs. Not a lullaby, a lament, a protest song disguised as poetry. That's what Breton has always been, a quiet riot. But let's talk facts. Breton is a Brythonic Celtic language like Welsh and Cornish. It's not related to French. In fact, the two get along like oil and vinegar, or more accurately, like Paris and literally any place that reminds it it's not the center of the universe. Once Breton was spoken by millions, entire regions pulsed with it. Farmers prayed in it, children dreamed in it, women whispered love in it. But by the 20th century, the French state had declared linguistic war. You see, the old France didn't do multiculturalism, it did assimilation with a croissant and a punch in the throat. One republic, one people, one language. Guess which one? Parler breton est interdit. Speaking Breton is forbidden. That was posted in classrooms. Children were punished for speaking their mother tongue. Literally punished. With shame, with slaps, with silence. They called it le symbole, a humiliating token forced onto kids who dared to speak Breton, passed from child to child like a curse. That's not a cute little relic of the past. That's cultural erasure dressed as national unity. France didn't kill Breton with violence. It smothered it with policy. Quiet, bureaucratic genocide. Language death by paperwork and propaganda. And so the numbers dropped. By the 1950s, the damage was deep. By the 2000s, critical. Today, maybe 200,000 speakers remain, most of them elders, a living language gasping like a beached fish on the shores of its own homeland. But Breton doesn't die easy. In the 1970s, the music roared back, the harps came out. The Binu, Breton bagpipes, screamed again, Brège Tau, Brittany forever. Alan Stivell plugged his harp into an amplifier and turned ancestral grief into prog rock. Diwan schools were born, radical immersion schools where Breton was the only language of instruction. Not just to preserve the language, to raise a new generation of Bretons who could think, dream, fight in it. Let's be clear, Breton isn't dying, it's being starved. There's a difference. The French government still refuses to grant it real status. Macron's lips say diversity, but his pen signs budgets that forget the Diwan schools exist. UNESCO lists it as severely endangered. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Education lists it as Inconvenient. But here's the twist. The youth are waking up. They're learning Breton not because it's practical, but because it's theirs. Because survival is sexy. Because speaking your grandmother's tongue is revolutionary in a world that wants you mute and marketable. Ne vern ket penaos eves lavare, nemet evefe lavare. It doesn't matter how it's said, only that it's said. Because when you erase a language, you erase a way of seeing the world. You lose metaphors that don't exist in Parisian French. You lose lullabies that soothe generations. You lose idioms like mi amuse colon en emgal. My heart is lost in itself. Try translating that into bureaucracy. So, no, Breton isn't quaint. It's not some linguistic antique to put in a museum next to a crepe recipe and a tourist map. It is defiance with grammar. It is protest with pronunciation. Every time someone says, "Yekhed mat," cheers to your health, they're spitting in the face of cultural erasure and drinking to the survival of something deeper than France can measure. This isn't nostalgia. This is resistance. And France? France still doesn't get it because it thinks power is monolingual, because it's still drunk on the wine of empire. But the empire is crumbling, and in the cracks, the old songs are leaking through. So next time you think about France, don't just picture Paris. Picture a coastline where the wind still hums in a language older than the state that tried to bury it. Picture Brittany. Picture Brège. And remember, Uryez Zoer Bed. A language is a world. And Breton? It's a world that refused to burn.
Parfum bleu, the perfume of cultural superiority, worn by ministers who can't point to Brittany on a map, but think Breton is just slang. Top notes of stale wine, denial, and powdered patriotism. Smells like colonial ambition in a spray bottle. Parfum bleu, available wherever heritage is inconvenient.
On your screen, a map of what the English history books conveniently blur, Ir hen Ogledd, the Old North. Long before the Angles got their name on the island, the north of Britain was home to Brittonic kingdoms, Reged, Gododin, and Elmet, where the language wasn't English, it was Cumbric, a cousin of Welsh. Britain versus Anglo-Saxon territories, 600 AD. Here's the real early medieval snapshot, not the myth, the map. In pink, the Britons, still holding it down across Wales, Cornwall, the north. In green, the newcomers, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, carving up the east like colonizers with a birth certificate. This wasn't a smooth cultural blend, it was a takeover. The Britons didn't fade, they were pushed, displaced, rebranded. So when people say Anglo-Saxon England, tell them only half the island got the memo. Anglo-Saxon settlements versus native Britons. This map doesn't lie, it shows the cracks in the conquest. By 600 AD, the Anglo-Saxons had taken root across the southeast, Jutes, Angles, and Saxons planting flags and building kingdoms. But look closer. In the west and north, the native Britons still held ground. These weren't forgotten people, they were the original ones. The Brittonic presence persisted long after the swords stopped clashing. So don't buy the clean-cut narrative. Britain wasn't conquered overnight. It fractured, resisted, and remembered. Linguistic genetic legacy of the Britons. Science meets ancestry in this map, and the past refuses to stay buried. Fine-scale genetic studies reveal something the Empire tried to erase. The Britons are still here. Modern Cornwall and Devon show distinct genetic clusters, markers of Dumnonia, the ancient Brittonic kingdom that stood its ground. Not folklore, not myth. DNA doesn't lie. While England became Anglo-Saxon in name, the West held on in blood, in language, in silence. This isn't just heritage. It's resistance encoded in the genome.
The Ministry of Monoglot Affairs, preserving the sacred right to never learn a second language, proudly funding monolingual school syllabuses, language bans in regional councils, cultural extinction, but politely, the Ministry of Monoglot Affairs, because pluralism is just too much admin. The Institute for Very Standard French. They believe Breton is a threat, Welsh is a rumour, and Basque is terrorism. Official supplier of bureaucratic indifference since 1831. Now offering grants for heritage erasure. Terms apply. The Institute for Very Standard French. If it's not from Paris, it doesn't exist.